Welcome to this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, the first podcast dedicated to helping civil engineering professionals succeed in work and in life. I'm your host, James Taylor, and in this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, I'll be talking with Danielle Schroeder, Transportation Staff Engineer at Gannett Fleming and Student Outreach Director for WTS Philadelphia, about the dynamic world of STEM outreach and its impact on shaping future engineers. Let's jump into today's episode.
Before we dive in, we'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the FE and PE exams. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with Danielle Schroeder. Danielle, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, James.
So Danielle, could you start by telling us a little bit about your journey into the engineering field and what inspired you to pursue this career path?
Sure. So my engineering origin story starts at home, literally. My dad is a union carpenter and actually built the house that I grew up in, which not many people can say. So from a young age, I got to see the whole construction process where my dad would work on, side projects at our house, as well as, as a carpenter, all the projects he got to work on throughout Greater Philadelphia. But you would think with all of that, maybe I probably would have heard about engineering, but I didn't hear about engineering until my junior year of high school, where I went to a local college that was having an engineering girls camp, where I got to do a bunch of different labs, including civil, mechanical, all different engineering disciplines, and found out through that civil engineering would be perfect for me because it takes that, love of construction and then my already known love of math and science that I've already had throughout school and kind of mashed them together into civil engineering. So that's how I got into civil engineering.
So talk about a little bit what you do today. So, obviously you've had this journey, but what do you do today?
Yeah, so I am a civil engineer in the transportation industry, and I work on a variety of projects throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on more bridge retrofits, reconstruction, variety of different things all throughout Pennsylvania, which is pretty cool.
So Danielle, we met in person this past summer at a conference, which was great. And since that point in time, I've been following you and seeing all the things that you're doing. And one of the things that you're big into is STEM outreach. And I'm curious, what was your initial step into STEM outreach, and what inspired you to get involved in that area?
Yeah, so I think my catalyst of getting inspired to get involved in STEM outreach was my personal story of learning so late about engineering. So pretty much as soon as I got, studying civil engineering at Drexel, I got involved with Drexel SWE, or Society of Women Engineers, and got to work on a lot of their volunteering and eventually leading programs for their outreach program. So I got to do a variety of classroom visits and then even volunteering at our local science museum.
So with that, there's been a lot more that's taken place over the years. Where have you gone with STEM? Where are you at now? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of great things that you're doing with STEM.
Yeah, I do a variety of different STEM outreach programs. I lead our student outreach committee for WTS Philadelphia. In the past, I ran our K through 12 or kindergarten through 12th grade outreach program for our local ASE Philadelphia section or younger member forum section. But I got to do a variety of different things and, doing a few virtual things, especially since March 2020. I've done a lot of virtual talks with students all across the world. Just to tell them how awesome STEM is and specifically what I do as a civil engineer.
So talk a little bit about what some of the importance, and I think it's kind of common sense here, of why STEM is important. But do you want to talk a little bit about why it's important to be able to do those types of things and be able to share about STEM for those that are younger that might be interested in those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for the sheer fact of how often do they really get to talk to STEM majors. I think prior to wanting to become a civil engineer, I wanted to be a teacher like my mother. And I still kind of get to do some of that teaching through STEM outreach, which is kind of cool. But like, you can't be what you can't see is usually what I go to. So getting into these classrooms or going to these tabling events is so important, because then they get to see this as a viable career that they can go into, which I think is pretty cool, getting able to inspire that next generation to hopefully go into our field. And I think you've talked about this on a previous podcast episode, but right now we don't have the civil engineers that we need to complete the projects that we need to do in terms of maintaining our infrastructure. So there's another outer importance of our STEM outreach.
It's shining the light, right, on what we do. And I think, one of the things, engineers are very humble, I think, in nature of, hey, we do this job, and you can see the roads, you can see you're getting water to your house, you can see the things that civil engineers do, but it's not something we necessarily go out there and share enough about, of the importance behind an engineer, or why engineering is great and all the things that it does. I feel like STEM outreach does a little bit of that, of shining that light on what civil engineers do.
For sure. And to add on to that, again, I do all of these STEM outreach events, and it's great to, inspire the next generation of civil engineers, but similar to what you're talking about of shining that light, chances are not all of them are going to become civil engineers, but right. Getting them that importance of what we do as civil engineers, because a lot of the things that that we do, they may take for granted, of driving over a bridge or, clean water, any of those different things, like at least they take away that importance. So when they grow up and maybe they're going into a different field, that they have that importance, right, and understand what we do to maintain our existing infrastructure and beyond.
So what are some of these unique formats of STEM outreach events that you've encountered, and how do they cater to different types of audiences? I know you talked a little bit about, hey, 2020 you had to switch to virtual, but what are some of the other unique formats that you've gone through?
Yeah. So I'll just focus on like in-person in terms of these two. In terms of in-person, the two main formats I usually think of are like a typical classroom visit and a tabling activity. So of the classroom visit, typically you're going to a classroom, and what I typically like to do is start with a presentation, a short presentation with lots of photos and everything to kind of show them what I do as a civil engineer, or maybe engineering in general, depending on who I'm talking to. And then I like to shift to a hands-on activity. And when I'm going to a classroom where I have a dedicated time, I really like to work on those teamwork-focused hands-on activities. So like the one I love is the Slender Tower Challenge, because it's got really simple materials. It's got, paper, tape, scissors, and they're building the tallest tower they can with those materials. But it really gets them involved, and the competition part of it is also a little fun for the kids. But I really like to make sure that they understand that engineering is a team-based activity, that we're doing all these projects not by ourselves, but with a team of variety of different civil engineers, variety of different engineers, and other folks that are part of that and are stakeholders in our project. So that helps reinforce that through the activity.
Do you have a preference on what you like doing?
I think I like the classroom visits more because it's like dedicated to those specific students. And then, I try to work with the teachers to, if I can, kind of pick an activity that maybe is relevant to something that they're already teaching in their science or math classes, if I can, which is kind of cool. It's like almost like a secret code. Like, wait, how does she know that we're working on that? But yeah, I think I like the classroom visits when I can. But sometimes that's not viable. So there's other opportunities, virtual, for example, but then the tabling activities. So this is typically like our local science museum or such, where you just kind of have a booth and people can stop by or students can stop by for 2 minutes, or they can stop by for like 30 minutes. So for those specifically, I try to pick a activity that's got more of an iterative process for it. So like for this one, I think of like foil boats, where you get a specific square of aluminum foil and you build a boat, and then you get to load test it with pennies until it fails. So they get to see that, and then they go, oh, okay, this only held 50 pennies. Let me redesign it and see if it can hold more. So that really helps for the students that want to try it once. And then there's the, super curious students there to like, oh, no, I got to beat my personal record. I got to stay and do some more. Yeah. So, and then of course, while we're doing that, we'll talk about different, might be buoyancy for that specific one, but like talk about the science behind it, or even just answer questions about what it's like to be a civil engineer. And those are good too, because the classroom visit, you're talking to a finite number of students. The tabling activity, you could have so many people coming through, even adults, kind of going back to what we were talking about before of just like getting the importance of what we do as civil engineers out there. Even the parents, are asking questions about what we do. So pretty cool. But I love all the formats.
How many different, or I guess, how many STEM events or outreach events have you been doing in an average year recently?
I'd say, including virtual ones, I feel like I've done at least 20, if not 30.
That's
in
awesome.
terms, the virtual ones have been great too in terms of that. So, but not as many in-person ones as I like, but I get to do a variety of them. One of my favorites is, I know we're not really talking about this necessarily, but going back to the schools that I went to. So I'm actually going back to my grade school later this month to talk about what I do as a civil engineer. So those are kind of like my favorite to do, of going back to the places I went to where I'm an alumni, but I get to do some in-person visits, just not as much as I used to.
And if you probably put yourselves in your shoes a little bit of like, hey, looking back, I was in this position and I could have used someone to come in to talk to me about these things. And it's great that you're doing those elements and commend you for that outreach, because it's something that we all should be doing as engineers to help grow the industry, is to really being able to find those next engineers for the future. Based on your observations, what characteristics would you say make a STEM outreach event stand out as particularly successful and memorable? I think we talked about a little bit with like the tabling activity of trying to challenge someone to do even more, but what are some of those characteristics?
Honestly, my success metric is mainly, did the students have fun learning about STEM? Because we kind of already talked about that. Chances are not all of them are going to become civil engineers, but I love to get that takeaway that they know what we do, but, and an appreciation of the work that we do, but really just making sure that they're having fun and then trying to get, them to ask me questions about what I do, I think is particularly what I find it successful. And it's been really cool when it's like, hey, we actually need to wrap up. Like they have all these questions and it's like, we actually have to wrap up because we're running out of time because they have so many questions. It's always fun.
Could you share some creative ideas or tools or resources that have been effective in the hands-on STEM outreach activities during these events?
Sure. So the two activities I've already mentioned came from Discover E or Discover Engineering, because that's my go-to resource for finding any hands-on STEM activities. On their website, like you can search by time you have allotted for the activity, like grade or age level, and even like engineering discipline. So that's usually one of my like go-to resources when I already have an event set up and I'm looking for an activity that I can do. Another great resource is ASCE or American Society of Civil Engineers pre-college outreach webpage. On this one, they also have some hands-on activities, but they also have a library of best practice webinars that include things like Engineers Week success stories or making your STEM outreach events more accessible. So just things like that, those best practices to make these STEM outreach events even more better in the future. So those are my two go-to resources.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing of these tools are available for just about anyone, right? Like, and it's something where if, hey, you're sitting there thinking, I really want to be able to give back more. I want to be able to help with these outreach activities. And you might be thinking to yourself, I don't know where to start. These are great tools to be able to help out with that.
Exactly.
Now, how do you get connected with schools and different events? Like, is this something where you're going out and reaching out to them, or are they coming to you, or what's the process typically of what you found on the STEM outreach?
Definitely a mix of both. So like kind of going back to my, when I was K through 12 co-chair for ASCE Philadelphia YMF Younger Member Forum, we did a lot of emails just out to these various schools in our local community. So it was kind of just, sending those emails out and hoping a few of them stick. But kind of going back to that alumni aspect, we would ask people on our board that where they go high school, where did they go to elementary school or younger, and having them be that contact, because it's, again, so nice when you can say, hey, we have an alumni that would like to come back and talk about what they do in terms of that. The other resource in terms of finding places to reach out to is the STEM ecosystem. They have they're not clubs, they're organizations, but within the STEM ecosystem, they have very different ones throughout the country, and I think even beyond the United States. that you can work with them to find different connections as well. So the Philadelphia STEM ecosystem is one that I usually go to in terms of what can I help at? Because sometimes they even have events that they're already looking for volunteers too. So variety of different places.
That's great. I love that. So reflecting on your experiences, is there a particular moment or event in your STEM outreach journey that really stuck with you that you hold dear to yourself?
So a few years ago, I think it was 2018 or 2019, I went to a school and I actually talked to the entire school at the same time in their auditorium, which was like both chaotic, and also amazing at the same time. So this was K through 8th grade. And, I was doing my quick presentation in the beginning and talking about the Slender Tower Challenge. And to kind of get them in the mindset ready for doing their designs, I just had, photos of all of these skyscrapers. And I, asked the question, so what do all of these skyscrapers have in mind? And one of the students, and again, it had to have been like kindergarten or first grade. It was like very young of the students, raised their hand and said, all of them have lights on them, so airplanes know that they're there. And I was just like so taken aback and so like amazed that they were thinking about things like that. Like I wasn't thinking about it at that age. So it's like things like that I hold dear in terms of memories that these kids are impressing me when I go out to the STEM outreach events.
Well, it must have been a really good one because it's been 5 years now since that took place, and so I'm sure that's something you look back on and just see the impact that you've made, and still sits there with you day in and day out.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about being the student outreach director for WTS Philadelphia. Can you talk a little bit about what WTS Philadelphia is and what that role entails as being the student outreach director?
Sure. So WTS stands for Women's Transportation Seminar, and I'm part of the Philadelphia section. That section has been around for now 45 years, which is pretty cool. So they're doing a lot of fantastic events for the greater Philadelphia area and even beyond, since we have like a little annex for the Lehigh Valley chapter. But they do programming for transportation professionals all across our area, hosting various events on professional development. They even have a mentoring program. So many, many different events. My part is just one of the committees, which is student outreach. And as student outreach director, I oversee 3 programs. Our first one is our annual scholarship program. Then our student chapter, which is a board of students, both undergraduate and graduate, that are studying transportation-related majors that help to create events about networking, professional development, like resume review, all of these different things for all the students in this greater Philadelphia area. And then lastly, we have Transportation U, which is very near to my heart, or TRU. But this is the program that is for young women ages 13 through 18 who are interested in a career in transportation. So prior to this role, that was one of the STEM outreach initiatives that I led. And it's really cool in terms of getting that young of an age involved in transportation in general and just seeing all the different things that they can go into with our field. The unique part of WTS is that it's transportation professionals. So while there are a lot of engineers in the transportation industry like myself, there are so many other careers in transportation that we cover, which is pretty cool, like finance, marketing, all these different parts that bring us together. So I honestly learned so much from these programs as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for what you're doing there. And that sounds like that true program sounds like an awesome thing to be doing. And it's not just engineering. It's about the transportation industry as a whole, which engineering is a big part of that, but there's a lot of other things that are there as well. One of the other things that you were involved in is another intriguing project, at least to me when I was reading about it, was the Princess with Power Tools calendar. Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Of course. So the Princess with Power Tools calendar is an annual program that is led by Reinvent It magazine, which is the nation's first print magazine about women in STEM. So I was one of their princesses in their 2022 calendar. And what this entailed is that I dressed up as a famous fictional princess of my choosing, did a photo shoot, and then sent these photos to Reinvent It magazine to select one for their calendar. In addition to that, I put together a short biography where I related my story as a civil engineer to the story of that princess that I picked. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Star Wars universe, but I picked a princess from that universe, and something that you know about Star Wars is the Force. So I used a little bit of creativity leeway to say that I work with the Force in terms of that, because when you're doing all of these designs, you have to worry about forces like dead load, live load, and nature load, and so many other things. So making little parallels to the princess that kind of goes into that, and that was also part of the calendar. And then they've been doing this for a variety of times. So there's a 2024 calendar out right now, and this calendar has been distributed to students in 50 states and 20 plus countries, which is pretty cool and a unique STEM outreach experience.
Very much so. Yeah. It sounds like that was a lot of fun for you to go to do. A little bit different of an activity, but definitely something that, like you said, is unique in that aspect. It sounds like it was. And how did you get involved with that?
I actually met the Reinvented magazine CEO Kaylee at a SWE event, or Society of Women Engineers event. I think it was like one of the annual conferences, and she reached out and said, hey, you'd be great for this. And then there was an application, but it was similar of kind of just maybe a draft of essentially my bio of and what princess I was thinking, and then, got approved. So there was a small application, but it was definitely worth it.
That's awesome. Lastly, and our time together is coming to a close here shortly, but what key piece of advice would you like to leave with our listeners, especially those looking to make a meaningful impact in STEM outreach?
Yeah, I would say even if you are just somewhat interested in STEM outreach, please get involved. I know our local ASCE Younger Member Forum is always looking for volunteers, so I'm sure that there are professional societies or other organizations local to you as well that are looking for volunteers for these events. And going off of what I know about our local section, they already have presentations and activities and even events already set up. They're just looking for more volunteers to talk about their stories, especially in civil engineering. I know we didn't really touch on this, but there's so much that you can go into just in civil engineering. So being able to bring diverse volunteers to talk about geotechnical structures, transportation, all those different parts, and have them talk about why they picked it is so helpful in itself. And then also feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Like if you already have an event set up and want some advice, I'm always happy to talk things through with folks to help them bring these events to fruition, regardless of where they're happening.
I love it. Thank you, Danielle, for all of that. And it sounds like we've got an advocate on our side right here. If you need help, feel free to reach out. So thank you, Danielle, for sharing all of your wisdom on STEM outreach today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, James.
All right, now it's time for our CE Hot Seat segment of the week with Danielle Schroeder. All right, welcome to the CE Hot Seat. Are you ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right, Danielle, do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, morning ritual, lunchtime ritual, things that you do consistently on a daily basis that contribute to your being as a successful professional?
So this one's more of a necessity than necessarily something that I picked up. But my partner and I have a dog named Nemo. So I have to have daily walks with Nemo in the morning. I think these have been great because it's always nice to start a day with a little bit of fresh air. But it's also good, like just ready to get into that good mindset of before I start my day of just clearing my mind, getting ready for the next day, and what tasks I need to tackle throughout that day.
What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you've found to be extremely helpful in your professional and or personal development?
Yeah. So one I read somewhat recently is She Engineers by Stephanie Slocum, also a fellow civil engineer. But this is a fantastic book of just getting through that transition of college to professional, or even just as a professional now. She shares so many awesome tips about communication, becoming a thought leader. And I know this is called She Engineers, but it's not just for women. It's for anyone in our field.
Thinking back on managers of your past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What made them your favorite?
I think the best manager I've had, or managers I've had, are the ones that truly listen to the interest of those that they supervise. For example, I spoke with one of my managers about getting more involved with a specific client's work. And now I'm one of two people working in our group on a pretty awesome project for that client. So really working, with those that you supervise and seeing how you can align their goals with projects in the future. I know it's not always possible in the current time, but trying to help them in the long run, I think is so beneficial.
All right, I've got one final question, and that's the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. So basically, if you got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them to share some career advice, what would it be?
To seek out mentors. I would not be where I am without the help that I've had with mentors that have helped me with crucial skills or advocated for me when I'm not in the room. So if they don't already have mentors, to seek out a mentor. And if they already have a mentor, to seek out more mentors, because it's kind of nice. Like I personally have a board of directors, I'll call, of various mentors from different industries, different backgrounds that help me to continue to grow in my career.
Danielle, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
On LinkedIn. We'll share my LinkedIn in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Danielle. Appreciate all that you had to share, and looking forward to more STEM outreach in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any resources, websites, or books mentioned. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your civil engineering endeavors.